Blog Talk Radio.
Ooh.
Cal, God, take me away.
All right. Welcome to Wednesday Night Musical Osmosis. I am your host, Nick, the Saucy One Cat Source, humble servant of rock and roll. And as always, I am broadcasting to you live from the land of meth and honey, Caryville, Tennessee. And I also want to introduce my wicked, my sassy, my mountain fabulous producer, the butter to my parquet, Danielle Prizer.
Oh,
are you with me, darling?
I am. We had a moment. We had the front door open there for a minute.
Oh, was it the wind?
No, actually, it was a short little visitor who had to come get close. Anyway, now I'm not sure if you're aware, or if the listeners are aware, we are having a very special guest this evening. He has not called in quite yet, so if in the midst of your idiot fanboy shtick he has not called, then we will be calling him. So that'll be interesting.
Well, let's get to the business at hand, because this is our last broadcast of 2013. We're taking a break from all our shows so we can kind of streamline things. Everybody knows that maybe 2 weeks ago we stopped doing the Friday Night Drunken Trivia and the Sunday political show, The Ignorance Equation. And for anybody who hasn't been following the Facebook pages or Twitter or whatever, the reason we had put everything on hold is because when we started doing this, we were just going to do one show, the political show. And it's basically going to be once a week, me on the mic, just kind of talking politics, maybe taking some calls. Things have really kind of blown up and got bigger faster than anyone probably expected. We didn't have any kind of infrastructure built. So on top of our normal, if you can call it normal lives of work, kids, you're in school, all that good stuff, we were also we also put out the Friday Night Drunken Trivia show, which is your baby. And I started doing a music show because I was like, well, if I can get people, like Titus and former mayor Richard Muty on the Sunday show, let's do a show where I can just fanboy out and have people that, just totally floored me growing up you know, as an artist, music-wise. So the other two shows we put on hold because we have to get sponsors. We put the YouTube channel up, working on the Roku channel, and a ton of other stuff. And we had to get guests and write, or contestants rather, and write questions. You had to write the questions for Friday night. But the music show, I could kind of chuck along and kept doing because all these bands I've listened to for 15 or 20 years. I know everything about them, so it wasn't like I had to do a whole lot of preparation for this. You know, it's just kind of like get on there and talk to them about, you know, everything that I've always been a fan of, I guess. But we've got great stuff coming up next year on musical Osmosis. I believe I got the okay from the Vandals, and then I haven't heard back with a confirmation. I was going to try to do one more show this year, but I think they're going to get pushed back to January. But as far as the big guest on musical Osmosis in January, would you like to let the audience know who that is?
I would absolutely love to. We are just waiting to make sure that they can make the date that we have chosen, but we will have the Flowbots on our show. Absolutely. And I'm so excited I can't even stand it.
Yep,
Absolutely.
and on the Sunday show, we are going to have actress/author Jamie McCall. We are going to have the star. Yep, she's actually a stand-in, so she was on the set but not actually doing acting in that particular episode. We are going to have the writer and the star of the movie The Dirties on our first show on Sunday. Who else? Chris Naravano. I always butcher his name.
Novembrino.
Novembrino.
Don't worry about the government.
We'll be on the second show.
Yep. Then we're going to have Jamie McCall and then Charles W. Thompson, who is the author of the book you are reading right now, I believe. Is that right?
Indeed.
You're reading his now about the Kennedy assassination?
No,
okay, that's that one.
Government Worth Saving, that one. And also, we are going to have a good buddy of mine who's very involved in helping the needy, helping the hungry. Andrew Gimme of Honored Way Production will be on the first show in February. And last but certainly not least, your baby, first Friday in January, Friday
in January.
the 3rd. Who am I playing in Drunken Trivia?
You will be going up against, if anybody saw the TBS series King of the Nerds, you will be going up against the comic book girl, Elena Smith. She was one of those who she got on the show for her mind. I mean, really, she is the comic book guru, and so we are going to have a comic book themed show in its entirety. Everything will be comic book themed. Our prizes are comic book themed. Every question will have some root or base in the comic book universe. So we are going to have a ton of fun with that.
And
Absolutely.
direct everybody where they can keep up with us during the holidays, since this is our last live broadcast of the first.
Of course, you can always go to facebook.com/musicalosmosis, facebook.com/drunkentrivia, or Ignorance Equation, and all of those places will take you to our Facebook page. You can find us on Twitter, of course, twitter.com/drunkentrivia, or twitter.com IG_equation, and all of those things. If you can find one, you can find the rest of them. If you can find me, you can find Nick, you can find everything. So we're good to go. Absolutely.
All righty. Well, I've got my beer in my hand. I have got my Vindictives T-shirt on in celebration. In a few moments, hopefully, we'll be having Joey Vindictive from one of my favorite, all-time favorite punk bands, the Vindictives, on. And I got to tell you why I'm excited about tonight's episode. The Vindictives, more than any other band, had the biggest influence on my writing style. If not the music, then definitely the lyrics. And, I mean, here's why. The Vindictives, they walk that razor-thin line between the absurd and the obvious. And while they're staying true to that crass, snotty, vindictive sound, at the same time, they're not afraid to take a chance and do something completely unexpected, like their album, Music for Robots, which this is kind of like, it's their older songs, but they redid them, no lyrics, just electronic, like Xanadu type music. Kind of sounds like the old Marble Madness game, like in that vein, but it's all classic Vindictive songs. It's awesome. And, I mean, they were, like, really true pioneers as far as just the way they did music. It's something that really spoke to me. And I always said, when I had my band, Even Steven was the Mad Magazine of punk rock. And my writing style, I just got it straight out of the Vindictives playbook. So I'm really excited to have Joey on tonight. I also got to let everyone know out there that this was the hardest episode of Wednesday night musical osmosis for me to put together, because I love music, and I'm the kind of person, when I really get into something, I want to share it with everybody I know to the point of being fucking obnoxious about it. So the challenge for me here is, in a short hour that I have to sum up why I love this band, and like playing 2 or 3 songs and asking about a dozen questions. And usually when someone says, you know, what's your favorite couple songs by so-and-so band? I could be like, oh, yeah, Pennywise, Badge of Pride, and Broheem, or No Effects, like Bob and Franco Un-American. But with the Vindictives, I have like at least 20 favorite songs, and they're all my favorites for completely different reasons. So as far as trying to sum the stand-up and to people who've never heard them in an hour, that's pretty much going to be impossible. But I'll give it my best bet, best try. Real quick, you guys know from listening to the show, I only invite bands on that have had a huge impact on me as an artist. I always like to give a little bit of history, how the band's impacted me growing up, before I cue them in. So let's set the Wayback Machine to 1995. God, it was almost 20 years ago, and I feel like half the people listening were toddlers when 1995 was, and I was like 25 or something. God. Anyways, Jerry Garcia, after, I don't know, taking more drugs than Woodstock and Lollapalooza put together, he finally died. OJ, that same year, was found not guilty, and Americans rejoiced. And also in 1995, just for a little bit of trivia, one of my favorite movies came out, The Usual Suspects, hit the big screen. And believe it or not, the Vindictives was actually not introduced to me by Pat Sheehan. One of the few punk bands that I know that I can't contribute to getting to know through Pat Sheehan. Actually, our first singer, my buddy Jason Budd, introduced them to me. And I remember we were driving around. He popped the Vindictives in, the many moods of the Vindictives. And usually it takes me listening to a band a few times before I actually really get into them. I have to have that familiarity. But with the Vindictives, like, it was instant. Like, every song just rocked me, where I was like, holy shit, who are these guys? And I can't honestly remember any time between 95 and 2002 that I went to a party or that I was, like, going on a road trip with my friends that the Vindictives wasn't a soundtrack to. Like, that album, The Many Moods of the Vindictives, and No Effects' Punk and Drublick, those 2 albums were like the soundtrack of my youth. Anyways, that's all with my idiot fanboy. Let me go ahead and cue in Joey. Give me a second to pull him up here. All right, hello. Joey Vindictive, are you with us, sir?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you for calling in, Joey. I'm a longtime fan. How are you doing?
Good. You know, we've been working most of the day, and this is my break.
Right on. Well, I hope to make it enjoyable for you. You heard in the monologue, I'm a huge fan. I wanted to ask you right off the bat, because I noticed your music, there's almost something vaudeville about the way you guys present your music and your lyrics, that I want to just talk about your unique sound, the harmonies, the way you do punk rock. Was this something you intentionally set out to do, or is this like a lot of Chicago bands have that super high energy type of sound? Was this just indicative of where you grew up in Chicago, or was something you set out to do, or is this just kind of natural progression of the Vindictives? How did you get there?
Well, you know, about 10 years before I did the Vindictives, I was in a lot of hardcore, like, punk rock bands. You know, Victims of Society was the only one that resulted in an album. And that was at a time in Chicago when, you know, only a few bands had albums out. It was, kind of a big deal to do that. So I spent a long time doing the hardcore thing, and there's a lot of energy required there. And
definitely.
Yeah. So with the Vindictives, it was, nothing's really. Well, I guess some people are very conscious nowadays of what they're doing. Like we want to sound like this band or whatever. I really wasn't planning really too much of it. I mean, and I think that's really the only way you can write good songs is you just have to write whatever comes to you and work with that. Too much deliberation on it is gonna fry it and make it sound phony or whatever. And so I'm a big music fan, record collector. So I do a lot of analysis of other music, but I try very hard not to analyze my own.
Right.
Now, I know you were heavily influenced by the Ramones. How does that seep into your music without totally kind of making you copy or emulate them? How does it influence you without you actually kind of going after the complete sound?
Well, again, back in the early days of the Vindictives, like there wasn't this whole cult of Ramones thing yet, and there wasn't Ramones clones bands or any of that stuff. As a matter of fact, in Chicago and back in the early days, you wouldn't find many people who would accept the Ramones as a punk rock band because they had long hair and they didn't fit the trappings of. Chicago had a very strict code back in those older days.
So you mean in the actual punk scene, they wouldn't accept the Ramones as a punk band, not in like any kind of commercial sense?
Right. You didn't see people at punk rock shows wearing Ramones T-shirts, and
right.
So it was sort of. And back then you didn't see really any commercially bought T-shirts because everybody just made their own. Like I remember when like bands first started coming out with screen printed T-shirts, that they did themselves, and this was in the early '80s, and it was like, wow, that looks like a real T-shirt. It's not.
I remember those days.
And it was a surprise to see that. So yeah, the Ramones thing. I mean, I liked the Ramones. The connection to them with punk even was considered kind of distant in a lot of people's heads. In Chicago, it was very very strict, hard kind of thing. And I was always a fan, and but the Ramones kind of were one of those bands that I always felt were maybe a little above punk in the sense, like revisionist people will say, well, Iggy, is the Stooges is the godfather of punk or whatever. But no one was saying
right.
that back then. They were just saying, oh yeah, that's just like rock music. Like, like it was very serious, like the pedigree that was punk rock. So when I went into start the Vindictives, it was just the idea that you could inflect melody into your punk songs, like many of my old favorite British bands like the Buzzcocks and stuff did. Like I would I would personally, you know, say, well, I was probably more influenced by like something like the Buzzcocks or something like that than the Ramones. Like I didn't ever really think of that, you know, at that time. We ended up getting sort of lumped in with those with the Ramones type bands, but I you know, I never really thought of us that way. It was an honor to be thought of. I really loved the Ramones, and you know, but comparisons didn't really even start to come until down the line. Like you said, you got into it, and like around '95. You know, by then,
right.
Everything, you know, like the large body of our older work had already been recorded, and you know, it was like, you know, it was sort of changing gears at that point in the band. I was, you know, I was very ill at that time in '95, and it was a rough year. And, so, yeah, I mean, I didn't really make a direct Ramones connection. I mean, and that was, you know, when we covered the Leave Home album.
Right.
I felt like, well, you know, the Ramones are like a very specific thing, and if I'm not careful with it, it will end up sounding like a Ramones cover band. And I think the reason that we're being asked to do this is because someone wants a different take on it, you know. So I sort of used the record as more of a, I don't know, like sheet music, you know, and interpreted it in a way that gave people a Vindictives record using Ramones songs rather than covering them straight away.
Well, that's a good segue into your history, and I knew of your first three albums. I had never even heard of Music for Robots until I started kind of doing my homework, but I grew up with the first couple of Vindictive albums, and I was looking at your discography, and it is nutty because you've got your first two full-length albums, which have covers, and then your third album, of course, the one I grew up on, The Many Moods of the Vindictives, are, I guess, redubs, remixes of your earlier single stuff. And then you've got Music for Robots, and in between you also have Hypnopunk, which is a kind of a conceptual album. You guys have like, and this is awesome, this is a good thing, but you guys have like the most abnormal way of putting together and releasing music. Was this by design that you did like two cover albums and then you did The Many Moods and then you jumped into a conceptual album? Like you've just never really done a straight away, here's 15 new tracks album.
Well, I mean, it's again, you know, like The Many Moods of the Vindictives is a compilation of all of our early 7-inches and EPs and songs that were on like comps and things like that. And so that was all the stuff that came first. And it didn't get wide release. You know, I get tired of things really quick, you know, and so things just have to keep moving, like in order for me to feel interested and remain interested. So we were just putting out like a new 7-inch every few months, and keeping that nice and steady. So I think a lot of people, you know, think of Party Time, For Assholes, and the Ramones Leave Home as like our first stuff. That was all done after we had spent a long time working on, you know, doing all the original stuff and everything. And you know, there was quite a bit of time in between there. I mean, we're not even really playing very much by the time those records came out, just at how quick things went, at the pace that things went, it was important for me to just keep things moving quickly. Again, like I said in the beginning about consciousness, the best way to, not get self-conscious of your own music is just to keep moving really fast and doing something new all the time. And
definitely.
Yeah, so, I mean, all those other titles that you mentioned, it's like, I mentioned I'm a record collector, and so I like a lot of different types of music. You mentioned Muzak for robots, and
right.
Like, for me, that instantaneously brings into my mind Unplugged, which was, it was like, I heard some acoustic covers of some punk songs, and I was like, oh, it would really be cool to do some of our songs acoustic. Like, what would that sound like, And we didn't want to just go into it with a, like, sort of folk strumming kind of thing. We were like, but let's do it like completely unplugged, not an acoustic guitar with a pickup in it. Let's do everything unplugged, all 100% acoustic instruments. And so, I mean, we pitched in our money and hired a Russian violinist. We
nice.
did the guitar's finger style, which is classical. And, so everything was done really just completely organic. The only electronic equipment allowed was the microphone. And so upon finishing that, I started to think about, now what would be the opposite of that? I liked a lot of the German rock bands and things like that, and I was like, what would be the opposite of Unplugged? Like,
well,
the complete opposite of that would be to do everything electronic, 100% electronic, like, not electronic.
Music for Robot is fucking brilliant. Like I said, I hadn't heard of it until I started digging back into your history, but I downloaded it, and at first, like, it hit me, I was like, wait, what the hell's going on? Because I didn't read anything about it prior to it. I was just like, oh, I never heard of this album. And then I was like, oh, my God, this is like a totally, like, electronic version of their songs, and I was just blown away. Here I am, a fan of 15 years, and I found something old that still is, like, blowing me away about you guys. So I was really, really impressed when I heard that album.
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, I would say Unplugged was the hardest record that we ever did, but
are you guys self-producing at this point? Do you have your own studio and you're just self-producing, or are you still working with a label?
Oh no, we really, I mean, Hypnopunko. Some of it was recorded at Sonic Iguana by Master G, but the majority of it was recorded here at our home, and that was like around 99, I think, or something. I don't know. And ever since then, I've enjoyed the ability to have a home studio and work on things. And I mean, the big problem, and even now with a home studio, the problem that exists with a setup like that is that if you want things to sound real, like it's easy to bang something out and sound like a home studio recording. But if you want it to sound better and you want it to sound real, I guess is the word, like it was, like taken seriously, there's a lot of things you have to do in order to bring it to that level, which takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of time involved in bringing things to a sort of professional sound when you're using a home studio. kind of trying to get that processing feel out of there is a difficult chore. And
I gotta imagine it's a lot more gratifying though to be engaged in every single part of the music making process, right?
It definitely is. It's definitely fun. But you have nobody, you know, to like yell at,
Right.
any mistakes you make are your own, and you got to deal with them, and that's part of the price you pay for freedom, is that you're responsible, and I don't know. I mean, and a lot of that is just a financial thing. You spend in time what you can't afford in cash, and because it's expensive to like to do something like a full, like Hypnopunko, to do that whole thing in a studio would have cost a fortune, with all the layering of the vocals and all this electronic trickery. It's like it would cost a small fortune, and we never would have that kind of money, and no label is going to give it to us. So, it's just part of it. But yeah, it's all home studio stuff, and a lot of it can be taken care of if you have a good mastering guy. They know how to bring things out to where it sounds as good as it possibly can, and covers the full range, of all the different frequencies and all that. But
that's what makes you guys really ingenious, because a lot of punk bands, and I include myself in this, when even Steven went in the studio, we recorded 14 tracks in 6 hours. We went in a room together and was like, we're just going to play. And you guys are like a surgical instrument, especially with the harmonies and the way the music's arranged. You guys take this, it seems to me from listening to you, really fucking seriously. It's great, and it shows when you listen to the album.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from, if you listen to really early punk rock, I don't know, something like Alternative TV or things like that. Those guys were actually in a real studio being produced by a real producer. They weren't just throwing things together, which became sort of like it's punk, man. Who cares? You kind of had to have, a lot of people had that sort of fuck it attitude. And I just never could get behind that as far as the recordings go. Again, and this goes back to being a music collector. I want things to sound as good as they possibly can, and so, why not take punk rock really seriously? Why not take it, as serious as they did in back in the day, where it was not. It's almost like a second class or third class citizen approach a lot of people have to recording punk rock, it's just punk, man. That's the way, people will describe music that really doesn't even fall within the genre of punk. They say, yeah, man, they just fucking nailed it out, like punk rock style, and
right.
And what that means is that it just kind of sounds bad, to a lot of people. And I wanted things that would stand the test of time and that would sound good, because it's important to me, And so you spend extra time.
Well, that's why you guys were the soundtrack to my youth, and even Steven sold like 12 albums for that exact point, because I don't think we took it seriously. We just kind of did our thing, threw some songs together, went out and played shows. We pounded the pavement, well, we didn't have that precision that you guys had. So, I mean, it definitely paid off in the long run, I feel, as opposed to a lot of bands that I grew up with. I just kind of threw it together and was like, okay, I'm in a punk band now.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it can be fun, you know, to be in a punk band under those terms, but, like, you know, why not step it up a little bit, you know, and, like, put some
Right.
more
I mean, I took
effort
the
in
writing
it.
seriously because I was always a guy that was, like, more into lyrics than actual
Right.
music in any genre, and that's why I love the Vindictive songwriting style. I mean, it's just so crass and like, so snotty in your face, and it just kind of makes you look at our culture in this warped mirror. So definitely lyrically, I labored over my lyrics, but then when it came to the actual music, like I used to tell people, I'm not a bass player, I'm a performer. I'm a writer and a performer. I picked up a bass because it was the easiest instrument. I just want to be on stage, and I just want people singing my lyrics. So, I mean, that was kind of my approach from it.
And here's the thing, though. People pay attention first to the music. If you don't have good songs, they're never going to get to the lyrics. You know, like, they're not going to hang around long enough to really spend the time deciphering the lyrics. You know, so you have to make, you know, I mean, you got to make really good songs, you know. Like, you got to try at least to make, like, a song. Like, for every original song that's out there, I probably threw away a dozen, you know, because I want, a song is more than just a background to the words. It's got to be something that catches people and then makes them, and you know, only a small percentage of people are going to care about the lyrics. Like, even bands that they love, they don't really delve into them that much, you know. And yeah, I'm primarily a lyricist, I like to think, and so I wanted good enough songs that would make people want to check out the lyrics a little more, you know. And
Right.
you can attract people. You can attract people with, you know, good songs, and the opposite works as well. Is if you know, have songs that just sound really good on the surface, but underneath, when you start listening to the words, it kind of falls apart. You know, it's like you need to have both, and a lot of that is just, well, luck, work. I don't know. You know, there's a formula, I guess, to things, and you know, they don't put red pepper in chocolate cake, you know, for a reason. Like, when you're making a recipe, you don't. I don't know. So you try to find all the ingredients that are going to make it work, and but you know, at the same time, if you're not surprising people, again, I can only comment as a fan. I'm a big music fan. I love, you know, I mean, I love music, and for me, I want to be surprised. Like, when I buy a new record by a band, I want them to surprise me. I want to be guessing. What is this going to sound like? You know, it's like, oh wow, I'm really, you know, curious. And you know, you're asking people for $12, $15 to drop on your album. You should deliver something that is worth it, you know. And I've always felt that way. It's I don't know. It's like I guess it's kind of like a blue collar sort of way to look at it. But you know, everybody's just fooling themselves if they don't realize they're selling something. You know, you are selling something, and you know, it's like when you spend the time, when you sit down to write a song, you need to be conscious of the fact that if you're going to put that on a record, you're asking for someone's money in return for that, and money is hard to come by. Some people, you know, are shoveling shit for a living, you know, and if you're going to ask for their money, you should be giving them something that you really put a lot of effort into, and you know, like that you really care about, that you can defend. I mean, that's a thing about any song that I would write, is that I have to look at it before I'm gonna make it public and say, well, you know, does this make sense, or is it just a lot of words that sound cool together? You know, I have to be able to explain it, at least to myself, so it has some sort of honesty to it. You know, and
so looking back on your body of work, do you look back now and say, damn, I wish I stuck that song on that album, or I wish I never let that song get onto that album looking back? Or are you pretty happy with all the choices you made, since you do have so much material that you just kind of put to the side?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I never hesitated to throw things out, because I had been in a band before, and I knew what it was like to, you know, I mean, you know, back then it was really hard to get on a stage, you know, like you played basement parties and loft parties and things like that. And the worst thing was having to stand up on a stage or on a whatever with a microphone in front of a bunch of people and sing something that you felt kind of sucked, you know. And so that was a mistake I was never going to make again. I can't control how other people are going to feel about what I do, but I'm going to make sure that I feel good about what it is that I'm saying. I'm never going to be in that position when I have to do something that I think is kind of, you know, not too good, kind of sucks, you know. I wanted to be proud of everything, so, you know, and throwing away tons of songs is a great way to do it, you know. You know, if they're not working after a certain amount of time, you shouldn't have a lot of patience with them. Just throw them away. If they're good, the good parts will come back to you later, you know. I mean, that's what I've learned, you know. So discard quickly. That would be the advice I would give anybody writing songs, you know, especially nowadays where there's just so much music on the internet and everywhere, and there's a lot of it that's just poorly thought out, and it's just clogging up the things for people who are taking it real seriously. You know, it's like you should really give it your best effort. And I believe that everybody has some good songs in them if they really want to work at it. And you know, it's a neat way to sort of preserve your expression at a certain point in time. I mean, in my memory, when I think of things, I kind of think of things in terms of bands that I was in or songs maybe that I was writing at the time. It's hard for me to think of years and things like that. It's more like, oh yeah, that's when I was doing this thing or that project or whatever, you know. And because it's a state of mind that kind of encompasses the way you feel when you know, wake up or go to bed or whatever. It's like you're kind of in a certain place that whole period that you're writing something. And I think I've veered off, but yeah.
No, you're good. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially like to me, because, you know, Nick's on the side of, you know, he is a punk musician or was, whatever, and, you know, he wrote that kind of music, whereas, you know, I'm on the side of I sing, that's it. You know, I can't sing it if I don't feel it, but it has to be fun. I have to enjoy it for whatever reason. So it's like, you know, a lot of, for me at least, everything of yours that I really liked was because I was like, hey, that's fun. You know, the first couple seconds is like, oh, yeah, that's kind of cool. And it stuck with me because, you know, not necessarily because it was, you know, cookie cutter, but because, like you said, you're always trying to do something a little bit different and really trying to give people something for that hard-earned money. And it's like, well, hey, this this is different, this is new, this isn't sellout, this isn't every single other thing that you've heard on the radio 500 times today. This is something just a little different, a little better. And
the energy level,
you know, hopefully you can always
crazy. Like I said in the intro, usually I have to hear an album a few times to really get into it, but you guys' energy was so high. Like, I loved your album immediately, and that only happened a handful of times in my life where I heard something the first time, and I was like, this is awesome. So, I mean, definitely high energy.
I appreciate the, encouragement. Yeah, I mean,
all right, well,
I don't know. There is. I mean, I come, from a sort of blue collar standpoint on music, which is not real popular in the U.S. Where like I don't have, people are very quick to use the word sellout or whatever. And, I have no problem with people that are making a living off of music, and that can be at many different levels. I'm not a fan of the rock star kind of thing. I think there needs to be more room for, someone who just wants to make a living off of music as if it's their job. They don't want to be so and you see this a lot with younger people, and I've tried to talk with them. I don't know. I raised my children. My daughter's going to be 33 years old, and I had kids very, very young, and let's just say, without calling my wife ex-wife a crack whore, that she wasn't a very participatory parent. So I was raising my kids on my own until I met my current wife, and we're approaching our 25th anniversary.
Wow. I've never done anything for 25 years. Job, girlfriend, nothing. I can't imagine.
They're approaching their 25th anniversary. I mean,
yes, they are.
That's coming up 2015, and we have some fun things planned out for that. But you get older and you find, and that's the thing. Like I was saying about blue collar. Like I know musicians who have an attitude of like, this is what I do for a living, and that I find that a really honorable and artistic sort of way to live a life. It's like, when Green Day started to make it big, become celebrities or famous or whatever, it became the goal of every young band they thought they were going to become famous rock stars or something, and
now, were you on Lookout the same time when Green Day was on Lookout before they broke big, or?
We were on the label at the same time. And
how did that impact you and all the other Lookout bands when they finally broke through? Did that change the whole philosophy of that record label at that time?
Well, I think some bands thought that just being associated with Lookout meant they were going to become the next rock stars or something like that. But the majority of people kept their heads on their shoulders, and I didn't have any bad experiences with Lookout. They were always, my person there, was Chris Applebrand, and he became the president of Lookout after Larry left, and nothing but good things to say about them. They're, they always treated me fair, and you know, things started to fall apart with Lookout at a certain point. I don't really know any of the details of that, but it didn't affect me negatively or anything. You know, I've never been able to find as good of a label, you know, that was able to take care of you, advance you, the money you needed to work on something, or, you know, because when you're working on something, it takes a lot of time and energy, and you're really kind of locked into that thing. So it's helpful to have someone behind you that you know is going to promote it properly and is going to take care of it, you know, take care of your new baby, you know. And but yeah, I mean, like I was saying, you know, so I have a daughter who's a lot of her friends, you know, they all had bands at the time, and a lot of those kids thought they were going to become, you know, rock stars, whatever. And you know, my advice always to them, none of them on music anymore, but, you know, I was like, you know, you guys don't need to become a rock star. You know, you need to look at it like this is my job, and just craft good songs and like make good records. You know, don't waste money, you know, like, but, you know, I mean, it's not their fault. They were young kids, but most of that fell on deaf ears. But, you know, I really do believe that that is sort of the ideal way, or at least for me, would be an ideal way to live, is just be a, you know, it's like, oh, this guy, he works in an office. This guy writes songs, you know, it's like...
Right, and I think that's more reasonable today, because I remember when I was young, and my dad's like, oh, you're stupid, you're never going to be on MTV and make $1 million. I was like, there's so much more you can do in music and be successful besides going down that road. But it didn't seem real to anybody back then because you were so disconnected from the process. Now that you have the internet and you can put stuff on YouTube and self-produce, and it takes, you know, the whole DIY thing to a brand new level, now I think people are starting to come out of that fog and say, you know what, I can make a living, the same living as a plumber, doing what I love and traveling and having that experience, and I don't even have to shoot for Rockstar. I mean, with everything that's happening with the death of Tower Records and the album, that's not even a realistic goal for people anymore. So, I mean, in that small way, the internet's been a positive on music. Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very pro technology. I mean, I wouldn't be able to have, you know, recorded half the stuff I have if it wasn't for modern technology. Like, you know, I know you were curious, like, what happened in between the 90s, Vindictives, and lately, and it's, I mean, I've just been in other bands. I've been doing other types of music, and I mean, I just didn't use the Joey Vindictive name because I felt that misrepresented what I was doing. But like one of the bands that my pet band, my favorite band that I am in, other than the Vindictives, is Fairy Wonderpuss, which is a more hard rock kind of psychedelic, I guess. I really have a hard time describing it, but you know, we've put out a few releases, and we're coming up on our 10th anniversary, and going to be releasing some EPs, like a compilation of things, sort of like the Fairy Wonderpuss version of the Many Moods of the Vindictives, I guess you could say.
Nice.
A compilation of things that we've done in the past 10 years. And we're also...
Do you feel like no matter how successful you get in other bands that you're always going to come back to the Vindictives, that that's just kind of embedded in you?
Well, you know, I actually thought it was all over with the Vindictives. I mean, you know, Mikey from Sexy Baby Records contacted me and was like, you guys should do like at first I guess you wanted older stuff, whatever, but he was like, you guys should do, you know, another record. We'll put it out or whatever, a 7-inch or something like that. And I was kind of like reluctant. I really didn't think I had anything left to say, you know, with the Vindictives. But, you know, me and John, you know, we started to play around with the idea, and I found some songs like in the guitar. You know, we started to play around, and we came up with some ideas, and it was surprising to me. And again, that goes, you know, back to like not analyzing too much. Just let's check and see if we, you know, there is still something, you know, that can. I mean, it's not, you have to, you know, it's when a band comes back and does something new again, people are expecting certain things, and you don't want to give them, you know, tomato soup when they order chicken noodle. You know, you want to give them something. I mean, you know, people don't like to admit it, but when you're selling your music, you're working for someone. You're working for the people who listen to it. So you have a certain obligation.
Right. You're an approval-based product.
Exactly. It's a product that you want. You want to please the people that care about it. And so I felt like, well, if I could come up with some stuff that I feel sounds vindictive-y, you know, like, we'll do it. And we ended up, you know, finding a lot of songs. And so that's how come.
Now, you said you found them in the guitar. Does that mean you guys always put the guitar down first, and then the lyrics kind of evolve out of that, or do you come in with lyrics and you have an idea in your head, this is what the song is like, or?
A lot of it, my efforts I I have notebooks full of lyrics, but my efforts at taking pre-written lyrics and putting into music have never been good, you know. I've never had success with that. I know Bob Dylan did, but I never, you know, have. There's people like that, you know, that can do that sort of thing. I don't have that skill. So I tend to like to, sometimes I'll get an idea from something that I've written, say, you know, like lyrics or whatever, and that will kind of inspire some music. But then it always completely cycles away from what it was that, you know, was originally the inspiration, which is great, which is what you want. You just want seeds. You want something that sparks your imagination a little bit. You don't really, you know, you don't want sheet music. You want inspiration and I guess a little bit of a muse or whatever, and then that can take you somewhere interesting, hopefully, you know. So, yeah, I mean, I use found in the guitar a sort of metaphorical thing, just kind of like, let's see what's in here, you know, because that's your voice or whatever when you start to fiddle around with it. I do get stuff, melodies or whatever, in my head, and I'll hold on to them. Johnny is a much better musician than I am. Like, I'm not even a musician compared to his musical skills. I'm a songwriter and a lyricist, but like he can actually play the stuff that I write. You know, like I can't really play it all that well. I can sit down and write something that has parts to it, and then I can, you know, count on him to actually be able to play it fluently, and so then we'll work on it from that point. but I can put down notes and a rhythm that gives me something that I can write lyrics to, you know. But, you know, I mean, Johnny's one of the best musicians that I've ever seen in my life, and so, you know, it's really helpful to have someone that can interpret your work, like, and make it sound like a real song, you know. And then a lot of times I don't even know if I have anything until I see him trying to play it, and it's just not working, or it is working, you know. So that's, it's, you know, and you do want to try to surprise yourself. I mean, you need to leave enough room in there. I mean, you said, yeah, it was high energy and this and that. That excitement, I believe it comes from surprising yourself. Like, you have to still feel like the song or whatever it is you're writing is kind of got that magical excitement in it. You know, like, so many songs that people have done. I mean, I've been in a lot of bands, and so many songs, the best takes end up being lost in rehearsals, because it's usually that first or second or third time that a song works that never gets recorded usually, that is its best take. You know, like a band will get together and work and rehearse and work and rehearse, and then by the time they get into the studio, a lot of times the song can be dead. So this is one of the reasons why it's really nice to be able to have a home studio, because you can capture everything. You can capture that take when it just first clicked, you know, when it just first kind of made sense as a song, and then you can tweak it and you know, like, do things to it and improve upon it, but you still are getting that initial excited, wow, this is really cool, like, it really works, you know. That surprise is recorded. So,
well, I got to say, as far as you guys surprising, like, I remember the first time I heard I Will Not off Hippo Punko, and it was just, it was so different in your sound, but it was so the same. I mean, you could tell it was a Vindictive song, but it was so kind of dark on this other side. So, I mean, you guys are definitely very good about changing things up, pushing the envelope, and then, of course, Music for Robots is a totally different universe. And, I mean, now that I'm talking to you, I definitely see the mind frame that went into, because I was like, wow, how are these guys doing this? You know, so, I mean, it's definitely nice to sit here and talk to you and understand you're always trying to surprise the audience and surprise yourself, as opposed to just like, okay, now we need to pump out.
That's really what it is. I mean, that's why, you know, you watch a movie or you read a book or you like to meet a new person, or, you know, whatever it is you do. You're looking for a surprise in your life. You're looking for something that is going to add some excitement to your day or your life, and songs are one really good way of doing that. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, and hopefully you can write songs that continue to surprise. Like, when a person listens to it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, they're still surprised, you know. And that's really all it comes down to, though, is surprising a person. You know, you watch a movie, you know, it's like what the plot of every movie is. There's some people, they want to do something, but something different happens to change that, and then they're dealing with it. And that's the plot of every movie. And so the same thing with a song. It's like, well, you have some instruments, you have a guy with a voice and some words, you know. So the trick is to try to make that surprising in some way. And, you know, as time goes on, I think it gets harder. If you know, I mean, I follow other types of music besides punk, and I love the way, I think right now is like the best time for music there has ever been, because you have so many people trying to, they're combining all these different elements that they grew up with. I mean, you need to remember, rock and roll is not that old. I mean, it's not really that old. It's from the 50s. So you have people now combining all kinds of ideas, the widest amount of ideas that have ever been on the planet. And they're combining them all together to try and make something unique or surprising. And
we're also in a time period where that's more acceptable, because I remember back when I was a kid, everybody was diced up into little groups, and if you even tried to cross over, you're pretty much, oh, you're a poser, get out of here. How dare, like the first time I wore a Beastie Boys shirt, people were on my ass. They're like, you like the Beastie Boys? Like all my metal friends when I was in high school. And I was like, do you understand Kerry King plays guitar on this album and Rick Rubin is the producer of it? But they didn't care.
Yeah.
Like things were so divided back then. So you definitely have a willingness now for people to say, I'll listen to anything. I don't want to be boxed into like one particular label. So, I mean, you're right.
See, that's awesome for someone. That's awesome for someone like me, because I collect a lot of stuff, and that was what I was talking about when we first started to talk, was that, like, the Ramones had melody, and they had hooks, and they had, they didn't play a million miles an hour. They had mid-tempo, like, pop, really pop songs. Like, if you listen even to, like, the Sex Pistols' first album, or only album, it's a pop record. It's just played, and they have a nasty sounding singer and stuff like that. But so the Ramones, were not a real acceptable thing in Chicago punk. I think because it maybe wasn't harsh enough, and
right, image was everything back then.
Yeah, there was very segmented, rigid rules to what you could listen to. It was like, a big deal to admit that you listened to other types of music besides punk rock. Back then it was like, coming out of some closet or whatever. I enjoy other types of music, and that was.
So in the earliest Vindictive days, did you guys get any pushback from people that are like, "What are you doing? This isn't really hardcore punk rock"? Or was people
no,
just
the early days of the Vindictives, I mean, the early days of the Vindictives, it was kind of like,
because it wasn't your typical
at the time that I was completely done with punk rock, because I had spent, almost not 10, but maybe 8 years in hardcore punk bands, screaming at the top of my lungs, spitting out blood after practice, you know what I mean? And I was pretty much done with that, because at that time, punk rock was turning into what is now known as crossover, which is like metal and thrash or hardcore. And I didn't really find anything in that for me. I didn't really like that very much. What I was into was, I felt like enthused when I saw like the Butthole Surfers the very first time. The very first time they played Chicago, blew my mind, because I
forgot all about those guys.
Oh, they were just something to behold in the early days, because it was a pit of just thrash and hardcore, and every band kind of sounded the same, and every band wanted to sound like DRI or this or that, and while I liked DRI because at the time they were original and unique and all that, I didn't like the fact that every other band wanted to sound like them. So I was done with punk rock. I pretty much felt like I was done with it. And we put out our album posthumously. Like, it ended up coming out a few months after Victims of Society broke up. And that was when I first met Ben Weasel. And
right.
at the time, I knew him as Ben Foster because they hadn't changed over to Screeching Weasel yet. They were still calling their band All Night Garage Sale. And he sent me a fan letter because, you know, like I said, there weren't many bands. It was a big deal to put out a record. So, like fan mail, and you would pay attention to it. You know, you answered every piece of mail you got back then. And Ben emailed me, and it was like, I really love your album, blah, 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 you know. And he was like, cool, and we ended up talking on the phone, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to be booking shows, you know, at this club. And, you know, I wasn't very interested. But he kept calling me, you know, and inviting me
Was
out.
he in the neighborhood? How far away was he from you? Was he inside Chicago?
Well, you know, 45 minutes or something like that. And so we had become pretty good friends just by talking about shared, you know, love for certain books and movies and bands and things like that. And it hadn't occurred to me that punk had progressed. I felt like, well, this is just going to be another hardcore band or whatever, you know. And so I did go out to a show, and he introduced me to this whole new sort of scene of bands that had melody in their music. And so then the second time I went to where he was booking shows at Dirty Nelly's, Screeching Weasel played. Like I said, I don't even remember if they were called that then, but the first song that I remember hearing that caught my ears was Murder in the Brady House. And I was like, wow, this is like music, you know, this has, you know, like cool melodies to it and stuff like that. And so I became interested in punk rock again. Again, it was another situation where I just didn't think I had anything left to add to it. And we had become really good friends by then. And he was like, you should start a band, man, you know. And I'm like, at the time I was really busy with a lot of things. Like, you know, I had 2 kids. I was in college. I had my own business. I was a dental lab technician. I was, you know, running a support group. I was very busy. So I didn't really think about the idea of doing a band. But after going show after show, you know, I started to get the fever again, the taste, you know. And I was recording at home even back then, you know. And so I mean, Ben kind of cajoled me into it. And so
now, was this a side project for him, the Vindictives, or did he leave the band for a while and do that? What was the relationship in that time period with the Vindictives and Screeching Weasel?
At that time period, Screeching Weasel, I believe, was on hiatus. Or no, I think he was doing the Gorgor Girls at that time, which was a side project that he was doing, a really good one. I liked a lot. And I started the Vindictives. I don't even know if I had a name for it yet. I had Dr. Bob in the band. He was the first member. And we would work on, just him and I would work on his back porch on songs. And I needed a second guitarist to, you know, fill out the sound. And Ben was always good as a resource, you know, like call this guy or check this guy out or whatever and see you know. So I said, hey, Ben, you know, any people that would play rhythm guitar? And at the time, he had never played really, you know, rhythm guitar in a band or anything like that. So he was like, oh, I'll do it. It'll be fun, you know. So that was kind of how, you know, him and I, and it was fun because, you know, it's fun to play in a band with your friends, you know. And
right.
So that was really the origin of the whole thing, you know. And yeah, it was.
All right. Well,
it was fun.
We're almost out of time. I definitely want to get to the new album. Can you give us some information about the new album, when it's coming out, what we can look forward to?
Hard to give a deadline on it. Right now, I'm working on a solo album. I'm working on a new Fairy Wonderpuss album, and I'm working on Fuck Unicorn for the Vindictives. Yeah, I mean, I see that, like, I have to stay busy. I mean, I don't think it's a secret to people that have, like, you know, an anxiety disorder and things like that. And, if you pay attention to the lyrics, you can tell I'm not completely there. But for me,
it's not there either.
Yeah, Danielle has to deal with my anxiety all the time. That's why I do 600 projects at once.
My tactic for dealing with what ails me is to keep busy. And, you know, like, I mean, my wife and I and John's wife, and we had an art gallery and a theater that would have been coming up on its 10th anniversary in March, but we got closed down by the city for a zoning thing. They changed the zoning in the area.
Sucks.
Yeah. So we composed a lot of music for live theater too. And recorded it, and you know, that's, like I said, one of the great things about having your own studio is that, you know, I mean, we were able, like, someone needed music, we could compose it and put it together, and wham, you know, and so yeah, like, I've always kept very busy. It's really the only way I know how to, like, function, is by doing too many things, you know. But it's also great if you have a lot of ideas and things like that. You always have somewhere to funnel them into, which right now is why I find it necessary to have several bands, you know, is that I want to, like, I don't want to put songs on a new Vindictives album, for example, that don't belong there. I want people to get what they want, you know, and so, you know, you write songs and they end up in different projects and different places, you know. The problem is, you know, is with growth, is that for me, you know, like for punk rock or from any kind of rock, like hard rock, or to give it that sort of punkish edge, which is one of my favorite things about music, is I think you should always be working just above your comfort level. So you need to be working a little bit beyond what you're able to really do, you know.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and it gives your work a nice edge, and it feels new. Then, you know, whatever you're doing has a freshness about it. So you kind of want to try and push yourself. Well, when you've been doing it for a long time, it's really hard to find musicians that can, like Fairy Wonderpuss has 3 records out, but we can't really play live. There's an abbreviated version maybe that you can do, but we haven't, because I can't find musicians that like would really want to commit to learning to play that a little higher level of music. Everybody seems very much in a hurry to just like get on a stage in front of people, you know, and I'm sort of the opposite of that in the sense that I don't want anyone to, you know, hear what I'm doing until I feel like it's really good. And so I have a lot of songs that I work on. It's just that I need bands that can actually play it and devote themselves to it. Because it's a little more challenging than, you know, unless you're a really good musician, you're not going to pick it up in an afternoon. You're going to have to work it, you know, you're going to have to work hard at it. But that, for me, that turns out great, you know, because it comes out in the music. It comes out as energy, as you mentioned before, that playing above your skill level comes out as trying really hard, and that work, that whole work aspect becomes part of what ends up getting recorded or played live. And so I like that, and that's desirable. But it seems like a lot of people, they don't want to push themselves. You know, they found a little envelope, a little place that they like to play in, and
right.
They're not, you know, they're not willing to like go further and try to stretch their talents or you know, like try to be better. And you know, I mean, yeah, it just takes a little more work, and you can do cooler things, you know.
Well, we are almost out of time. In fact, we are out of time. I definitely want to thank you for giving me a great last show of the year. We're going to be back in January. I got to about a third of the stuff I wanted to get to. If you want, I would love to have you back in January because there's so much more I want to talk to you about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably have some good news by January, too, about some of the projects and different things, like where they're going to be at. So
nice.
Sure.
I've got two songs here, Joining the Circus, because I wanted to touch on the new EP, and we didn't get a chance to, and I've got Robot Man. Which one do you want to end the show with?
Joining the Circus, because it's new.
All righty. We will be back in January. This is Joining the Circus. This is the newest one from the Vindictives. Joey, once again, it was awesome talking to you. Definitely had a big impact on me growing up, on my little group of friends. We always listen to you guys, every party, every road trip. Every memory I have is to, you know, any party memory I have from the 90s up to 2002, 2001 has the Vindictive soundtrack running through it in my head. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Cool. Yeah. Here comes Joining the Circus. We'll be talking with Joey again in January.
I come to realize I am not fit for this life. I will now be taking charge. I will now be living hard. Oh, I'm
righty, guys. Thank you for listening to Wednesday Night Musical Osmosis. I want to thank everybody who's been so supportive the past, I think we've been on the air 5 months now. It has surpassed every expectation I've ever had. We will be back in January. I think the first guest we're going to have in January is the Flowbots, but go and check out Musical Osmosis on Facebook, and we've also got a page, a separate Musical Osmosis page as well. All righty, until next year, Happy New Year's, guys, and I will see you in 2014.